Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited to be once again joined by Logan Burchett and Jimmy Ton of the Forecaster team. Today, we are doing a kind of a joint event all around using a financial model and a financial forecast to impress investors in closed checks, to build rapport, and to build long-term relationships, to make your investment experience or your fundraising experience grounded in reality, but giving you something the confidence to go in and talk to investors about numbers, about your business model, about, yeah, you made stuff up, but not just complete magic, but there's a reason behind the way you made that stuff up and how to talk about that throughout the investment process. Logan has been doing programming with us for almost 2 years now. He's an expert on it. He started Forecaster with Stephen Plappert, who's been some other events, and they are really the specialists in this, especially in the realm of startups. There's all sorts of financial planning and management stuff out there, but they're real experts in, kind of the same water in which we swim. And I will say, if any of the programming in this webinar today really strikes a chord with you and you don't want to go deeper on it, Logan is actually part of our partner network for a new service we just launched recently called Mission Control. That's at gus.com/mission-control. That's where we're going to go deeper. A lot of times people hear this high-level education and this content is fantastic, but they have a bunch of follow-on questions about how does it fit my particular scenario? Does it work for a CPG company? Like, is this model actually accurate, et cetera, et cetera? Logan will be joining us next week in our first financial model teardown as part of that program. We're actually working with subscribers of that program to get individual feedback, to have smaller sessions where we can really dig deep into these concepts, because it's broad and deep and all that, but we're going to stay broad today. So Logan's going to run us through a presentation. Jimmy and I will manage the Q&A and the chat. Please use the chat, say where you're coming from, what your startup name is, as well as use the Q&A functionality to ensure you get a question asked if you have a burning question. And Jimmy and I will both try to help out while Logan is dispensing his wisdom upon us. So without that, Logan, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan, as usual, for a great introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can go ahead and get started here. First and foremost, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know that as startup founders, you have a ton of things going on. Ryan and I were just talking about all the stuff that we have going on, so we know how hectic that life is. So just taking an hour to level yourself up as an entrepreneur, I think means a lot. And I appreciate everybody spending some time with me today. And today we're going to be talking about how to leverage a financial model to impress investors and to close checks. So when you look at the primary use cases of a financial model in forecasting, they fall into two general buckets. They fall into helping you raise money and tell your story to investors so that you can actually get the business funded and go on to run the company. And then they fall into supercharging your business. So using those set of projections in order to forecast the future, in order to set goals, in order to manage to goals, in order to make sure that you don't run out of cash. Now, we do a lot of content around both of them, but today we're going to be focusing on just that one specific use case of financial modeling, which is impressing investors and closing checks. So that is not all encompassing of everything that a model does, but this is a very, very specific nuance of it. And the reason that this particular presentation is so important to me is because whenever me and my co-founder Steven originally started Forecaster, we had just an idea, right? Like, I'm sure some people in the audience today, we had no traction, we had no revenue, we had no product, we had absolutely nothing, but we had an idea, we had our ambition, and we were pretty financially savvy. So we were able to put together a really strong financial model to tell the story of what could one day be Forecaster, right? And we were able to rely very heavily on that model because we didn't have really anything else other than this theoretical outcome that we were essentially pitching towards. And in our experience, the best way to de-risk an investment for an investor is to show them mathematically how you're going to turn their dollars into more dollars. And by doing that, we were able to oversubscribe our first round of funding from $650,000, I think, over to $750,000. So this stuff really works. We actually did put it into practice, and we were able to raise a lot of money in so doing. So it really, really can work. And hopefully some of this is going to help you all achieve a similar outcome to what we achieved. I always like starting a presentation by showing what gives me the right to stand up here and talk to you all about financial modeling. You can ignore this guy over here on the, I guess, left for me. That's Stephen Plappert. He's my co-founder, but I'm Logan Burchett. I'm co-founder, chief operating officer. I had been a fractional CFO for a number of years prior to starting Forecaster. So I had worked with dozens of companies from pre-revenue all the way up into Series B, helping them think through finances, helping them raise money, helping them model out their business. I started Forecaster in 2020. We've worked with over actually over 1,000 clients at this point, building financial models for them. We've raised ourselves just shy of $10 million. We have a team of 34 folks. So I do practice what I preach. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today are things that we as Forecaster have used to raise a lot of money and be able to cultivate a really strong team. And I'm actually going to be showing you all some resources that we use, our actual resources that we use to accomplish some of this stuff. And just to give you a sense of what Forecaster is, the value proposition of Forecaster, we're going to be going into the platform, but from a very, very high level, the way that I like to explain the value that we provide at Forecaster is by looking at it through the lens of larger, more mature companies, right? So if you look at any kind of larger middle market company or publicly traded company, and you look at the organizational structure of these companies, you're going to see that there's a lot of overlap between the departments and the functions that those companies have and what startups have. So you're going to see things like sales and marketing, you're going to see things like accounting, you're going to see management structures, all of the similar ones that you see in startups. But then you're going to see one particular function that may seem unfamiliar, and it's called FP&A. Now, that stands for financial planning and analysis. And the entire purpose of that department is to ingest data, both finance data and non-finance data, analyze that data, and then forecast that data into the future so that you can make really important financial decisions today. So and you do this through an exercise called financial modeling, which is really what Forecaster is all about. So once this is done, you can look at who you can afford to hire. You can look at what happens if certain metrics change, if they go up or down. You can set goals. You can set, specific things that you want for that company to accomplish. But if you don't have a huge budget, right, and if you haven't raised tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, you can't reap the benefits of this department because it would require you to go out and hire a CFO and a team of analysts to manage dozens of spreadsheets. That's why we created Forecaster. So we've created an online integrated web app along with a suite of financial analysts that help startups or small businesses, private companies, unlock the benefits of financial planning and analysis. Went a little premature there, but unlock the benefits of financial planning and analysis. And, the way that we work is that every company that we work with, we pair them up with a financial analyst to learn about their business, to help build out their model and help build it totally custom for them. So if you're interested in checking out Forecaster a little bit deeper, Jimmy from our team is going to be throwing a link in the chat, and that's the best way to get in touch with us. But that is enough about Forecaster for now. We'll come back to that here in just a little bit. I want to start by talking about what a financial model actually is, right? So I think a lot of folks, whenever they decide to start a new company and they decide that they want to become an entrepreneur, they get all kinds of relatively unfamiliar terms thrown at them, and they feel like they're having to drink from a fire hose and learn everything all at once about all kinds of different stuff. So I really want to start at the ground level here, and I want to explain in my own words, in our own words, what a financial model is and the value that a financial model brings. All right, so I'm going to do this using an analogy that was actually not mine. It was started by a guy named Troy Hennicoff, who was the former MD of Techstars Chicago. He actually came up with this story to explain financial modeling. I think it's really good, and it goes something like this. So essentially, what it does is it likens financial modeling to the early days of the car manufacturing process. So if you look at how cars used to make their way into the universe, specifically looking at the design phase of that process, it would all start with a pen and paper. So you'd have an engineer that they would sketch out what they want that car to ultimately look like, the schematics of it, everything that it's going to take to build that car. Then once that's done, they're going to move into this phase that you can kind of see on the screen here on the right, where you've got this guy that is carving out of a giant clay block, essentially down to the component level, a replica of what that car is going to look like. So what that's going to do is it's going to give them a sense of weight distribution. They're going to get a better sense of what that car is going to look like once it's fully built out. They can get a sense of like how aerodynamic it is, things like that. But that's kind of the next phase. Once that's done, then they're going to start building an actual working prototype that they can actually use to test. So they're going to take that clay block and then they're going to turn that into actual steel and rubber that they can then put on an actual test track. And that's whenever they're going to do the majority of their testing, right? It's at this point that they're going to take an experienced car tester and they are going to put it on a track and they're going to run it through the gambit to see what the car can essentially do, right? Like what is working, what's not working, things like that. And so they're going to take it on a track. They're going to put it on wet tracks. They're going to put it on dry tracks. They're going to try high speed tests, low speed tests. They're going to do it in hot temperatures, cold temperatures, sandy tracks, anything that they can do, any kind of variant for weather or anything. They're going to run this car through essentially just to test how it performs. Now, if you really think about it, this is very, very dangerous, right? Because these are early days of car manufacturing. Like this is the very, very early days of building out and managing and creating cars. And by definition, any innovation that you do is going to be totally new and totally untested because it is new, right? It is something that has not been proven to work. And the only way to know if it works is to go in and actually physically test it. And so, a lot of times there would be problems. There would be major, major issues during testing. So you can imagine having a car with maybe a slightly wider base and then trying to take a sharp 90-degree turn and maybe flip, right? Or maybe it's a narrower base or whatever it is. And whenever that happens, it's not just a car that is getting totaled, but you're literally putting somebody's life in jeopardy, right? These are people that are actually having to go and test these cars. So if there's an issue, not only is somebody's life in jeopardy and they could actually get hurt, you also have to go all the way back to the drawing board. You may not even know exactly what caused the point of failure. You have to go start the process over, start with the pen and paper, go back to the clay, and then go and rebuild it until eventually you get a version of that car that everybody feels comfortable going off into mass production and then putting out into the world, right? I think we can all agree this is a very bad process, and this was something that has been long since abandoned. And we now have much more efficient processes by the use of software, right? So we now have software called CAD, right? The entire purpose of this software is to design and test cars online in an application that you can go in and you can test cars in minutes instead of months or years, right? So I can build all the way down to the component level, like a video game, a fully functional car that it will have real life gravity, real life kind of like understandings of the implications of the environment that it's in so that you can test that on a virtual track. And you can run that simulation, the same one that you had to do physically before. Now you can run thousands of simultaneous simulations to see exactly how this car is going to perform under a simulated hot track, dry track, wet track, sandy track, whatever it is, all of them, and you can run them all at once. And if there's an issue, then not only does nobody get hurt, but the software can even identify the point of failure, right? So in our example before, whenever that car and that sharp 90-degree turn flipped over, the software can zoom in and they can say your wheelbase was too narrow, right? And this is why it tipped over. If you increase it by 5% or something like that, then it should be good to go. Would you like to rerun simulation? Yes, I would. Okay, put it back on the track, keep going until eventually you get it to where it's like 99.9% good to go. All right. And once you get to that point, that's whenever you move on to physical testing. But by this point, you've eliminated, like I said, about 99.9% of the potential errors. And that is why this is a scalable, it is a much more efficient process that we have here in 2023 than it was back in the 1950s. And this is this perfect analogy, we think, for financial modeling, because in the same way, we can use a financial model to simulate our business and run tests in minutes instead of years. So we can see as entrepreneurs what happens if we try to add a new product line, or maybe we're trying to invest in a new marketing channel, or maybe we want to build out an entire sales force. Or if we're really, really early, we can understand if my business model is viable, right? If the way that I'm thinking of making money is actually going to work. Is my total addressable market big enough, right? Is my churn rate going to be low enough? Things like that. So essentially what you're doing is you're seeing, will your business handle a sharp 90-degree turn, or is it going to flip over into a barrel roll like the car did? But in this potential world, if there are issues, nobody gets hurt. You don't get hurt. Your investors don't get hurt. Your co-founders don't get hurt. And it really gives you the chance to optimize before you jump in head first. You waste a ton of time and a ton of money. So this is why we're really passionate about this. We think that if you build it right and you invest the time in it, a good financial model can be one of the most powerful tools in your business arsenal. And so, essentially what you're doing is whenever you've got the financial model built, you've got essentially a virtual test track that you can use, and you can run all types of variants of that. Um, Another way that we like to explain it is that if a financial model, if you're continuing along that car, if you're continuing along kind of the car analogy, and you think about your accounting, which a lot of companies have accounting set up, that is essentially like your rear view mirror. So if I am looking into the past of what has happened behind me, and I try to drive a car, and I'm trying to drive a car by looking through my rearview mirror, I'm going to come up with a lot of issues, right? I'm not going to be able to see what's coming up behind me. So a financial model is like your windshield. It kind of opens up the future so that you can see if you're going to have a cash shortfall, or if you're going to have, any kind of like major hindrances to the business coming up. It's going to allow you to kind of see the road coming up. So just relying on accounting is it's not going to give you what you need in order to run your business. And then continuing along with that analogy, if you're looking at KPIs and kind of like real-time indicators, that's kind of like the dashboard, right? That's like the gas gauge, things like that. That's going to tell you in real time what is going right and what is going wrong with your business. But the financial model is the only tool that's going to show you financially what's coming up ahead of you. And so because this is so important, right? Because this is essentially a simulation of your business, it is going to tell you a lot of really interesting things about your business. It's going to hold the answers to a lot of very key questions that a lot of investors are going to ask. And this is why it's so important with fundraising. So I threw a lot of the common ones up on this slide. So a financial model will tell you, how much money are you raising and why are you raising that much, right? So a lot of founders, they will have a good answer for how much money they're raising, but whenever they're really pressed about why specifically do you need to raise that $1 million, they kind of flounder a little bit, right? I think if a lot of us are being honest, whenever it comes to raising money, we kind of pull a nice round number out of the air, and we kind of look at what other companies are doing and we say, well, that seems good enough for me, so I'm going to just raise this $2 million because that's about what I should be doing at this stage, right? But is that really the right amount that you need to be raising? And I think if you're pressed, a financial model is going to help you answer those types of questions, right? A lot of that comes down to capital allocation. So, how are you going to be spending the money? What is the hiring plan going to look like, right? I mean, for most startups, 80% of our costs or more are going to be our people. So you need to be able to look and see what positions do you need? Who can you afford? What are you going to be paying them? When are you planning on hiring them? All of that stuff. Investors are going to want to see, if I give you this money, where is it going to be going, right? And then it's also, how are you going to be growing? What acquisition channels are you going to be focusing on? How are you going to be investing your time? Are you going to be investing in paid marketing? Are you going to be doing direct sales? Is your ACV going to be able to support that with the unit economics that theoretically are going to happen? All of these are really, really important questions that investors are going to want to know the answer to. And then this last one that I put on here is kind of a milestone approach, right? How many customers do you need to hit 1 million in revenue, 2 million in revenue, 5 million in revenue? If you're raising a seed round, I need to be able to show the investors that I can get to a Series A, and I know what my business needs to look like at around a Series A, right? So they need to also get comfortable with that. If you're going to be investing in a seed round, you need to see, okay, what is that next milestone to get the next round of funding done? How many customers is it going to take to get there? Do I believe that you can do that? A financial model is going to help you answer those types of questions. So, you may be wondering when you should invest in a financial model. A lot of times we get founders thinking that it's for larger, more mature companies, right? So in our experience, we see that in our experience, well, having a great financial model at the seed round is really more of a separator between you and other startups, right? So we have seen companies that have raised rounds of funding at the pre-seed and the seed round without a financial models. But whenever if you think about kind of like the act of fundraising, and whenever you think about kind of like the landscape of the fundraising environment, and if you look at kind of how investors think and behave, it's an investor's job to say no most of the time, right? If an investor meets with 100 companies, then they might invest in, 1 to 10 of those companies. They are looking for the absolute best of the best of the best. And especially if you're in the earlier stages of fundraising, the pre-seed, seed rounds, those, and a lot of times, are some of the most competitive fundraising rounds because they're the most crowded. There's the most amount of companies that are competing for those dollars. So it is not a game of being able to blend in and see what you can get by with, right? You really want to be a separator. You want to be somebody that stands out of the crowd. You want to be that top 1% of companies. So, in order to be that top 1% of companies, you have to alleviate all areas of risk. And financial risk is definitely real whenever it comes to early stage investing. So, even though some investors might not care about your financial model, they might not ask for your financial model in the pre-seed, seed rounds, some investors probably will. And you just want to be prepared whenever that happens. You don't want to have to be caught on your back foot and have to go out and then build that financial model whenever the investor asks for it. You want to be that top 1%, that top 10% whenever you're fundraising. I will also note as an anecdote that as the technology around financial modeling gets better, the excuses for not having a financial model fall away. And we've really seen this over the past couple of years. I like to think that Forecaster has played its part in that. But there really are very few excuses for not having a financial model now. So it is becoming more and more expected earlier and earlier on into the process. So we recommend just investing in a financial model early on and then keeping it up to date so that by the time you get to a Series A, you will have it up and running, because at the Series A, it is going to be absolutely table stakes. I personally have never seen a Series A round get done without a financial model being a part of due diligence. It is truly table stakes once you get to a certain size. So our advice is to invest in it early on. One last benefit, if you do invest in it early on, by the time you get to your Series A, not only will you have a financial model built that you can reference and put in your data room, but you will have months and months of forecast versus actual deep analysis using the financial model. And it really gives investors confidence that this isn't just a fundraising tool for you. It is a tool that you actually use to make decisions and run your businesses better. That's what investors want to see. That is good financial prudence. It's just good way. It's essentially being a good fiduciary of their money. So recommendation, start early and keep your model updated often. So now I want to talk about how to use a model in the pitch deck. And whenever I say pitch deck, I mean the literal pitch deck, the 10 to 12 slide deck that you use kind of in earlier conversations with meetings. And this is really talking about how you're going to loop a financial model, loop your projections into the conversations, and then how to progress those conversations in order to close investors, get some checks in the door, that type of thing. I will note that for the rest of the presentation, we're going to have to assume that you have a financial model built. So if you don't have a financial model built, either come and talk to us because we can definitely help you get there, or we have some good free resources that are completely free for download. So Jimmy, if you want to throw those in the chat, it's forecaster.co/templates. Then you can go and just get those free of charge. We only ask for an email address, but we're not too annoying, I promise. So whenever we're talking about showing your projections in a deck, really what you want to do is you want to keep it relatively high level, and you don't want to force the investor to go too deep in the weeds. Now, I told you guys that I was going to show you all some real data that we actually use here at Forecaster. This was actually our financial projections that we used in our actual deck for our pre-seed round, right? Or I'm sorry, this is for our seed round. So the goal of this slide was not to convince investors that we had the greatest financial model in the world. This was meant to be a relatively high level look at the business. Now, I'll note that for us, we have more numbers on this slide than I would recommend for probably 95% of startups out there. The reason that we have so many numbers on the slide was because we're a financial modeling company. This was on brand for us, right? We were a finance company. It would be almost weird for us not to have relatively detailed projections on even an original pitch deck slide. For most folks, you might even want to consider keeping it higher level than this. Maybe big revenue graphs or big call outs of just high level revenue targets over the next 5 years is a good place to start. but you really don't want to go really, really deep in the weeds and show them every number that you're using to calculate this stuff. You really just want to show them that the business is a big opportunity and that, expected margins are roughly in line. And then we wanted to move on. You want to do what you need to do in order to convey that message that, hey, this is worth paying attention to. And then you want to move on, right? There's some strategy behind this. There's a reason that you don't want to go too deep. And it really comes down to number fatigue and analysis paralysis. Those are kind of two big reasons. So you got to remember the original pitch meeting is meant to be kind of like a get to know you. It's meant to be a meeting that is trying to inspire confidence, try to get emotional buy-in for the company, right? You want them to walk away from that meeting being excited about the opportunity, being excited about you as the founder and wanting to dig in more. If you instead use that time to go through a spreadsheet with all of the numbers, you're missing the point. You're missing the forest for the trees, right? You are not communicating vision. You are not trying to get emotional buy-in. You're treating it as a transaction. You're trying to show them this is exactly how I'm going to be spending your money, and this is the financial outcome that you're going to make. Whatever, that's not really the game of early stage investing. That is more of what investing in, for example, a real estate deal might look like, right? So use that time to get that emotional buy-in, and you really don't want to burn up a lot of time in a relatively short pitch trying to do that, but you do want to show that you have done your homework and that you have the numbers. Now, the reason for that is because you want them to look at those numbers. You want them to look at what you've got on the slide. And once they're excited about the opportunity and they're meeting you as a founder and they're getting really, really kind of like bought in, you want them to ask, how are you getting those numbers, right? Like, what is the logic that's backing that up? Because hopefully the numbers are sufficiently large and sufficiently exciting that they are now excited about the opportunity. And now they want to dig in a little bit deeper. And now they want to go and understand how you arrived at those projections, right? And this is really the secret weapon for financial modeling whenever it comes into fundraising, because you want as many touch points with that investor as you possibly can get, right? Fundraising is a trust building exercise. It is something that you are going to spend a lot of time with these investors, getting to know them over time. And as they get more and more familiar, they're going to build more and more confidence in you as a founder. And that's what eventually leads them to investing in your company, right? So once they see the big numbers on the slide, they say, how did you get those numbers? That's your hook to then set up another meeting with that investor. And that is whenever you're going to spend that time really digging deep and going through your financial projections, right? It's a great way to just build more familiarity, to build more confidence with that founder. And that's how you're going to progress the conversations. And the key to getting this meeting, or the reason that you really want this meeting, is it's because it's a very, very confidence inspiring meeting, right? There are fewer things that are going to give investor confidence to invest in your company than showing them a detailed plan for how you're going to turn their dollars into more dollars, right? And by the time this meeting happens, you want them to be excited about the opportunity, and you want them to be, ready to dig in and now understand the financial implications of it. And that's whenever you're going to be setting up that second meeting. So now I want to talk about that next meeting. And this is a meeting where you are going to be going through your financial model in a fine level of detail, answering the investors' questions about your forecast. All right. So I like breaking this down into individual time periods of what you're going to do before the meeting, what you're going to be doing during the meeting, and then what you're going to be doing after the meeting. So I like to kind of break them down and look at them individually. Now, before the meeting happens, our recommendation is that you do not send the investor your financial model, right? Now, some people have different opinions on this, but we've been doing this a long time, and we feel very strongly here. You don't want a model to live on its own. A financial model is not a document that is meant to live on its own. You want to be there in the meeting, and you want to be in control of the narrative, and you want to present the model to the investor in person or on a call. And this is going to do a few things. So the first thing it's going to do, if you don't send them your model whenever they ask for it, it's going to give you that leverage to get that next meeting, right? So if they're interested in your business, if they're excited about your opportunity, and they want to dig in, they can do that, but they need to do it with you in the room. So what that's going to do is it's going to demonstrate your understanding of the model whenever you ultimately do present it to them. And whenever you show how well you understand the intricacies of your financial model, you're essentially showing your understanding of the business. Because remember, the model is a simulation of your business. So the two completely translate to one another, right? But the most important thing is that it's going to help you control the narrative. So if somebody asks for your financial model, if an investor says, just send me your Excel spreadsheet or whatever you got, we have a team of analysts. They're going to go through it. We're really good at Excel, all of that. What's going to happen is they're going to go through your model. And again, you got to look at it through the lens of an investor. An investor's job is to say no most of the time. So they're going to be looking around for things not to like about your model. They're going to be looking around for things that are going to give them pause and get any gotchas, on the business. And they're probably going to find it. You know what I mean? So like, everybody's model is not 100% perfect. So they're probably going to find a couple things that give them pause and give them questions about your company that they want answered. And you want to be there while that's happening so that you can control how that original opinion on the business is being formed. So it's just kind of like human nature, right? Whenever you make a first impression on anything, meeting a person or you seeing a pitch deck or a financial model, anything like that, you form a first impression on it. And once that initial impression is being formed, it is way harder to change it than it would be to guide how that impression is formed in the first place, right? So you want to be there while that first impression is happening, while it's being formed, so you can control how it's being formed. So it's really easy for an investor to get the wrong impression about a model if they don't have proper context. And like it or not, once that initial impression is made, it's super hard to change it. So you want to be there, you want to present the model. And whenever you're doing that, you really want to be in control of the meeting. And, a lot of people, especially a lot of founders that don't have a strong background in finance or financial modeling or anything like this, they get really anxious about these types of meetings. And they think that they have to go into this meeting ready for battle. They have to defend their projections against a big bad investor who's going to try to tear it to shreds. But in my opinion, this is a problem of mindset. So anytime that I go into a investor presentation and the goal of the presentation is to walk them through my financial model, which I've done countless times, the first thing I always say is that the only thing I know about this model that we're going to review is that it is wrong, right? There is a 0% chance that every number in this model is factually correct. What this is, it is not a crystal ball that's going to predict the future. This is a framework that me and my team use to set goals and manage to those goals. So I'd like to go over the goals that we've set and what we're going to be managing towards with you as, and we can kind of have a conversation about that, right? If you do this, it kind of disarms the investor, and it is not you sticking your flag in the ground saying this will 100% happen. These are guaranteed projections, anything like that, because that is not what a financial model is about. It is about setting goals and managing to those goals, right? So should be a working session. It's kind of like pitching an investor with your pitch deck. Whenever you're communicating the vision of your company with a pitch deck, you are just trying to use it as a communication tool to show the investor what you think is realistic and what you and your team is managing towards, right? And it's just like any meeting with an investor, they may ask some tricky questions, they may ask some challenging questions, but if you spend some time on the front end and you really do your homework and you make sure that you're prepared for the meeting, this should not be any more scary of a meeting than just any, pitch meeting, any normal pitch meeting should be. So you want to be there. You want to be in control. You want to prepare for the meeting. This is not you and the investor this is not you and the model versus the investor. It's you and the investor versus the model, right? So you're using the model essentially to analyze the opportunity together and have a detailed conversation about the future of your company. And then after the model's done, you always want to follow up. So you want to summarize what you talked about in an email. Once this meeting is done, now they have proper context. So now they can absolutely have a copy of that financial model. So if you're in Forecaster, if you're a Forecaster client, you can add them to your account after the meeting. Or if you're using Excel, you can send them the Excel formula or the Excel workbook after the meeting. All of that stuff, once they've gotten the proper context, and that's completely fine. And you always want to, make sure that all of their questions have been answered by the time the meeting has been concluded. So if they ask you about a new scenario, for example, so let's say they asked you what would happen if you doubled prices, right? Or they asked you what would happen if you were able to reduce your churn rate even further. A great way to kind of earn brownie points is to run that scenario in your financial model, send them a copy with that new scenario, and then summarize kind of what the implications would be. Essentially, what you're trying to do is just show them that the meeting was valuable to you and that you really appreciated their time and you kind of value their input. It's just a good way to get brownie points with an investor. And if you really execute this meeting well, if you show up to that meeting and you're confident, you're able to really articulate your business well using a financial model in the way that most other businesses can't, I think that you're going to have a really, really high close rate on this meeting. And this is why this is kind of a secret weapon in fundraising is if you can get to this step, if you can get to this meeting where you just walk them through your financial model in detail, I think that you are going to see a very, very high conversion rate because it will inspire so much confidence. And now, in the spirit of showing forecaster data, I do want to go through a real world example, which is Forecaster's financial model. So this is the financial model that we use here at Forecaster. We actually used a variant of this scenario earlier this year to raise $4.5 million. All right. So I kind of want to go through with you all the general flow that I like to take investors through whenever we're talking about these types of meetings. And this is kind of the meeting whenever you're going through your financial model. So the way that I like to conduct these meetings is by doing what I've kind of coined as the zoom out, zoom in approach, right? So I always like to start on the income statement and I kind of like frame this as this is why we're here, right? This is the opportunity that we're going to be analyzing together. And I want to show you kind of the mass of the opportunity and how large this can actually get so that hopefully we're all adequately excited. Right. So this is why I like to start with revenue is I like to show a nice revenue trajectory that hopefully the investor gets excited about. And then I like to go and I always start annually just to show, because the whole point of starting here is to show big opportunity, exciting opportunity. Now let's dig in. And then I go into monthly. And this is where I kind of go into the operations of this. This is where I say, okay, now I'm going to cut up that steak that I just showed you. And I want to show you exactly what we're going to do, exactly the path that we're going to be on in order to achieve the goal that we just showed you, right? So this is where we move into monthly. I can go into breakdown of revenue and things like that, but I also like to show kind of our actuals compared to what we're forecasting. So I can show how close we've been on this path for this long, right? So like not only are we going to be marching down this path, but we have been on this path and we've been pretty close on our forecasts to date. So that should give you additional context and hopefully additional reassurance that the stuff that we're going to be going over is likely to come into fruition because we actually operationalize this stuff. So then I like to go into customer acquisition. So this is where I kind of go through the logic behind this. So I've gone, this is the opportunity. Now I want to show you exactly how we're going to get there. So I can show you how many customers we need to get on an annual basis, right? I can show you kind of like our customer growth and how that needs to increase over time and what it's going to look like over time. And then I can go back and zoom into that monthly as well and show all of the individual targets within the month that we manage to in order to make sure that this happens, right? Then the whole point of this is kind of reassuring confidence that what I say is going to happen, we are going to be trying to manage. We are going to be managing to this, and we're going to be trying our absolute best to make sure that what is presented here is actually going to be adhered to. And this isn't just some throwaway fundraising tool, right? This is something that we're actually managing the business with. So I can go in December, for example, and say, we're hoping to get 47 new customers in December. And I can even show you the different ways that we're going to be getting those customers. So I'm getting 20 from strategic networks. I'm getting 9 from paid search. And I can even show you the split goals that we have within each of those. So if I'm saying I'm getting 9 from paid search, I'm going to be spending $15,000 this month to get on paid ads at a $3.8 or $3.80 cost per click. That's going to give me this many clicks, this many leads, this many deals, this many new customers based off of conversion rates, right? So it's not just some nebulous month over month growth rate or something like that that I'm trying to pitch to you. We have actual metrics, actionable metrics that we're using to manage towards that should give you even more confidence that we can actually hit what I'm showing you in the financial model. Right. So I go through there and then I show you how we're going to turn those customers into dollars. And I do that in the revenue stream section. So I can go out and I can show you the different SaaS offerings that we have. And I can show you kind of like in our flagship product, how many subscribers we have, our churn rate, our upgrade rate, downgrade rate, all of that stuff. I can go through in very, very fine detail just to show the investors how we're going to be essentially operating on this, all of the different ways that we're going to be using this to make money. And then I can go into the people to show these are the people that are actually going to be making this happen, right? So if I'm going to acquire those customers, achieve these revenue goals, I'm going to have a rock solid team working under me. And here are all the people, right, that we're going to be hiring, right? This is what the team is going to look like. This is how it's going to be growing over time. I can show you what I'm going to be paying them, when I'm going to be hiring them, what specific positions we're going to have. All of those things are all going to be included here, as well as all the other expenses that we have, right? And then we kind of I always like to end on the equity section, where we can go in and we can show kind of how the amount of cash that you're going to be raising is going to be impacting that. So I'm actually going to switch over to a different scenario here. This is the actual scenario that we used to raise 4.5 million, slightly different from the scenario that I'm showing you right now. But what I can show you is that essentially what this is doing is it's showing what the business would do with the additional capital and how it would run out of money without the additional capital. So if I go to my statement of cash flows, I can see that we're burning cash, and that we flip over into profitability before we need to raise any additional money, right? So it's just a really, really good way to show that the fundraise is actually needed, right? And that if we are to achieve all of these great things that we just talked about, that is why we need the money. That is why we always like to end on kind of the ask, right? In this particular scenario, we're showing us getting to profitability without any new investment. So just to kind of show you what that means, if I go to our dashboard, statement of cash flows, or look at our ending cash, then I can show how we're going to continue to burn money. And the dark bar is an actual, and the gray bar and the slightly grayer bar is the forecast. I can show how our cash is going to keep going down, until, in theory, around this time, early 2025, we're going to flip over into profitability and we're going to start making more and more money. And if you really wanted to see that, you could go out maybe a couple more years and you can see how it kind of goes back up like that. So you get that nice U-shape curve with before our cash actually hits zero. So it's a really great meeting to have if you're trying to inspire confidence with investors, because you are showing them on a metric by metric level specifically what your business needs to do in order to achieve the outcome that you all both want. So I want to keep about 15 minutes for Q&A. I do want to stop here by saying that we would love to offer everybody here a 20% discount off your first year for being on this webinar, which is awesome. If you are interested in kind of the different packages that we have 3 main packages: the Essentials, the Growth, which is our flagship, and then the CFO package, which is 500, 1,000, and 1,500 a month respectively. If you're interested in meeting with somebody from the Forecaster team to do a deep dive onto each of these, I recommend that you use the link that Jimmy shared a little bit earlier if you want to reshare that, Jimmy. But just rest assured that every one of these packages comes with a financial analyst that is going to build your financial model for you and help you keep it up to date with custom reporting specifically for you. So I'd love to chat with you a little bit more about that. And with that, I will stop sharing and open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Logan. I didn't interrupt you once. I think that might be the first time.
That's a record. I don't think that's ever happened.
Well, I think you've structured the presentation to include everything that we've learned together over the last 2 years or so. We got a good question from Chris, and there's some good questions in chat, but also use the Q&A functionality if it's available to you. That'll ensure we answer your question. I've been doing some things in the chat along the way, but we'll highlight and recast some of these. But Chris has a great question that we get every time. Forecaster seems to be geared more towards B2C models and modeling MRR or month-over-month stuff. What about a B2B SaaS subscription where they're annual?
Yep, great question. So, what I just showed was more of a B2B monthly model just because that's Forecaster's financial model, and that's just kind of how we do things. But we can do any variant of business modeling that we need to. So if you want to do annual subscriptions, we can absolutely do that. We can get it to where we're showing the MRR monthly, but you're getting the cash collections up front. We can show the cash flow impact of that, all of that stuff. We can do e-commerce. We can do hardware. We can do variants of different types of them. So it is not geared necessarily towards just, singular SaaS models. We can do all types of different modeling. For B2B SaaS too, if it's more enterprise, kind of larger contracts and things like that, the way in which we model that is obviously going to be quite a bit different. Our analysts will be able to walk you through that, and they'll build out a specific version just for you, a custom model for you. That's probably going to be more direct sales driven, where you're going to have a model sales count that is going to be in charge of getting leads, closing leads, generating revenue, that type of thing. So that's how you're essentially going to be growing the business. But suffice to say, yeah, we can handle that, no problem.
And hilariously, Forecaster used to be an annual subscription company. So if you came to one of these events like 6 months ago, you probably would have seen annuals. But the big thing when doing, even if you do annual subscriptions, we have a significant amount of annual products over at Gus. We do something called amortizing the revenue over monthly so that we have monthly visibility anyway. So even if we sell somebody $1,000 a year subscription, we think of that as an $83 a month subscription. Not that if somebody cancels immediately, they get the full refund, but that's when the services are rendered. And that helps you get a much better visibility into your future forecast, because you don't just assume, because I sold 10 annual subscriptions today, I'm, X more richer. It's like, no. Those imply a year's worth of service.
Yeah. I'll really quickly add that one of the fun things that we do in Forecaster for a lot of clients is we'll help them understand whether or not they want to do monthly versus annual subscriptions, because, to Ryan's point, the MRR could be relatively similar, but if you do annual, then you get bookings up front. So you collect the cash up front, and that a lot of times gives you an instant payback period, so you can reinvest all of that money into growth. So a lot of people find that they can grow much quicker, but that's an aside. But yes, we can definitely do.
We got a good one from Vikash. Does financial modeling imply having the three statements in place: cash flow, balance sheet, and revenue, which I'm assuming is P&L? Is there's more than that?
Yep.
Let them know.
Yep. So it's the three financial statements. Yep, and that's why they plug up to your accounting. So it's the income statement, the balance sheet, the statement of cash flows. They're all included, and that is what a good financial model should have. I will note that if you go online and you download some templates and things like that, you may find a decent amount of them that just have the income statement. But this is not going to cut it, I think. For most businesses, you're going to need all three statements, because they all kind of have their own purpose specifically. So yeah.
All right, we got another good one from Sahab. Is there information, and I believe this is inside Forecaster, is there information on how investors could see and play with the model so that the founders could understand? I think this is similar to the idea of like, the tides of software like this have been going back and forth all over the place, where it's like send the investor your pitch deck, but hooked up to a bunch of analytics so you can see like what slide they pause on and like how long they read it. And some investors are like, I never read those things because I don't want you in my thing. And other ones are like, just give me a PDF. But how do you approach that with the financial model side?
Great question. And this has been a debated one inside of Forecaster. So we have a suite of features that is designed for investor friendliness. So we have investor access links that you can create for specific investors. You can add them as users into the platform. You can even like restrict what you do and don't want them to have access to. But we do not have the ability to see or be able to like analyze what the investor is looking at. And that was a somewhat strategic decision by us, because we did not want to turn off investors from analyzing your financial model, right? We did not want them to, because eventually the cat's going to get out of the bag, that if you use Forecaster, you're going to be able to track what investors can and can't see. A lot of investors don't want to be tracked whenever they're going through due diligence and things like that. So we don't do that for that reason. But yeah, so that's kind of like our stance on that one.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, Gus has built software engaging in investor groups for like 20 years. And the amount of groups I've had give feedback, or investors being like, we want detailed stats and analytics on like everything that we do. And then when you start to build them, they're like, wait a second, not that much. It's a very interesting dynamic there. But a lot of it is, it's very bizarre, but like integrity and trust is essential to the early stage space in terms of, you should be open and honest about, every part of your pitch, and every single, new layer of diligence you go through with investors should not be like revealing things that don't true up with, how you got their interest in the beginning. It should just be adding details to it to increase the possibility that this is actually going to work out. So I think it was DocSend, and there was a couple others have always, we're just through a pretty crazy period of a lot of checks getting written with not a lot of diligence. So I think there was some thriving of some companies who might have been like, hey, like, you get all these cool analytics, but I think we're starting to return to the idea of like, The relationship is a personal relationship between you and the investor, and that is where you instill kind of the integrity in what you share and when, and you trust each other, so you don't actually need to have, you know, the surveillance state around your software. And we also agree with that kind of standpoint in Gust. We got another question, industry specific. They're talking about healthcare, which they're thinking B to B to C, which is kind of like, you know, there's a middle player or something like that. Can you also model that up in Forecaster? And also, do you have a trial period?
So yes, we can model that out in Forecaster. That shouldn't be any issue. In general, and the kind of like theme, because we get a lot of these types of questions, is like generally, if you can do it in Excel, you can probably do it in Forecaster. It needs to be a very specific kind of like unique thing that's kind of like wild, you know, that we can't handle. But generally, I would say we can handle pretty much anything. B to B to C is definitely something that we've done plenty of times. Do we have a trial period? Yes and no, I guess is the answer. So we have a 30-day money back guarantee, but we do request that you pay up front. So what happens is we will get you in the software for the first 30 days. We're going to be making sure that you're onboarded in the software, get your model built. That gives us, you know, that gives us our fair shot to make sure that you see success in the platform. If after 30 days, you're like, look, this isn't what I was looking for, we will happily hand you your money back and we will let you out of the subscription. Absolutely no harm, no foul. So it is not a true free trial in that you don't have to put down a credit card or anything like that, but it is a 30-day no risk to you type of trial where you can just easily get your money back.
And this is good advice for startups out there all over the place. Most startups do not have the cash resources to just give free trials all the time and the team capacity to do that, but they should have supreme confidence in their ability to execute and make it work. So an offer like that makes total sense, where it's like, hey, you always need money, you need growth and things like that. But, you know, having that confidence and that backstopping, like, we're going to deliver, like, it's
Big
we
time.
do.
And it's our way of saying like, just meet us halfway here type of deal, because it's like, we're going to spend probably 10 hours onboarding you. So if you won't even give us like a credit card, then it's like, that's hard. I mean, so that's kind of why we do
Yeah.
it. So.
Chris, who asked the question about monthly versus annual, he wants to know that month one, you know, he gets a team advisor for the model. Does that come as an extra cost above your essentials package? And what can you expect after month one?
So I need to be careful about how I answer this. Not for you all is the answer. There will be no additional costs for people on this webinar, but we are testing onboarding fees. So the answer for you is no, there will be no additional cost. And then depending on which package you fall in, whichever one that you select, that analyst will not go away, but the cadence in which you interact with them will change. So for an example, the essentials package, you saw the 3 packages on the screen. The essentials package is $500. You all obviously get a 20% discount. That package is mostly tailored for fundraising because you're going to get onboarded, and then that analyst that you work with is going to be updating your model every single quarter to make sure that what you showed the investors is being adhered to in some way. And they're going to give you reporting that you can then forward to those investors to fulfill your reporting requirements that likely come with the term sheet or your operating agreement or things like that. So that's the $500 a month package. The $1,000 a month package is kind of our starter FP&A. That's our flagship package where you get all of that, but the analyst will update your model monthly. And then in addition to the investor reports, they're also going to give you operator reports where they're going to show you your unit economics every single month. They're going to do a deep dive. They're going to recommend changes to your forecast. They're going to show you your runway every month. That's like a real true, like strong starter FP&A kit. And then all the way up to the CFO tier, that's whenever we loop in professional CFOs that are going to oversee your account. And those the CFO packages start at $1,500. They go all the way up to $4,000 a month, depending on everything that you need, the size of the company, all of that stuff. So good question though.
Yeah. We actually have some great questions here. I know the answer to this one, but I'll let you answer because it's your software. Vikash asks, is there support for what if scenarios? Like, hey, we're going this direction in our financial model, but like, I want to experiment. Like, what if we sold this for free and switched it over to this and yada, yada.
That's one of the biggest values of financial modeling. So that scenario analysis is what you're talking about. And yes, that's one of our core features. So you can, you saw this whenever I was kind of flipping back and forth between our $4 million raise scenario and our active scenario. So you can have as many scenarios as you want. And if you wanted to do true freemium or annual or monthly, all of that stuff, that's completely doable. And it's one of the biggest use cases of our software.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm now catching up on questions. I think that also answers Soul Pal's question. Very good one. What plan would you recommend for a company starting from zero? Should you even use Forecaster if you're starting from zero?
I recommend yes, and I would definitely start with the essentials plan when starting from zero. And I would use it, and I would just tell your analysts and onboarding that you're starting from zero and that you're kind of using it to feel out your business model. I would specifically, so I think that it's great for companies that aren't planning on fundraising, that want to be bootstrapped and just keep an eye on costs. But especially if you're fundraising, I would recommend that package, and just lean on your analysts and they'll help you out. But yeah, I would recommend that.
And I will back this up with saying we have sent, gosh, probably hundreds, if not, who even knows anymore, clients over. Forecaster and Gus have a very similar perspective on the idea that the big difference in startup success is not just, there is luck and chance and magicness and connection and who knows and serendipity, but there is a clear path of how you can de-risk a huge amount of the failures that come from just silly stuff, like not realizing you're going to run out of money because of, you know, the financial model that you put together or didn't put together, or the idea like we sold a bunch of stuff, we should be totally good, we're growing, right? And then finding out, oh, cost of goods sold is a thing that means that you have to pay out from the revenues that you collected a bit ago, depending on the nature of your service. You know, same thing with us in like corporate contracts and cap tables and things like that. So we have had, you know, startups from every stage, startups from, you know, the most Web3 tech only software companies to physical, you know, on-site virtual reality training scenarios, all use Forecaster and come back to us just glowing about, oh, this gave me, you know, clarity and insight into part of the world, which honestly most entrepreneurs, well, if you're really good at finance, often starting a company is something that you kind of don't consider doing, except for Logan because he's a crazy person. But yeah, it's a really good thing to have even in the early days and starting from zero. We got a last question here, and then I think we can super wrap on time. Do you take into account industry standards, income tax returns, employee growth rate, sales commission rates, et cetera, based on industry?
Yep, great question. So yes and no, again, is the answer. So a lot of that's baked directly into the software, like things like tax rates, things like that. But a lot of this we lean on a combination of our analyst experience and working with over 1,000 companies at this point, just kind of like knowing what standards are. And we do a lot of education with our analysts to make sure that they know what those standards are. And we also have a database of anonymized database of the companies that we work with, so we can understand kind of distributions of revenue, standard growth rates, things like that we can use to advise you on as well. So
that's super cool. That's a cool future path because
yep. So that's a relatively new thing. We built out a data warehouse that allows us to kind of anonymize and analyze, slice and dice it, all that stuff. So
yeah, I know one of the most interesting things, I think it was when HubSpot released it, was like, hey, do you want to see open rates compared to your industry rather than just open rates compared across every company ever? And that can be some really powerful stuff going forward. All right, last question, and then we will wrap super early. If you got two seconds for me, Logan. And this is another great one from Chris. Chris, thank you for asking so many good questions. Coming off of the idea of providing investor access and not creeping around on them poking through your model, but is there a way to get or keep models in sync or an export a model to a format where you can share it without necessarily giving somebody full access?
Yes, I think I understand the question. So you can download your financial model with all of the corresponding data, everything like that, into a Excel or CSV format, depending on what you need. And then you can send that to the investor, and that's going to correspond with your scenario. The only thing is once it's out of Forecaster, any changes that you make in Forecaster won't sync up with that. So we recommend just using the investor access links, or just adding them as a user to your Forecaster account. But again, we would recommend that you meet with the investor when you go over that model so that they can get that context. You can show them how to use it, and then they can go in and do whatever they need to.
But I think reading between the lines with a couple of these questions stacked together, if you can build out a scenario, can you share a specific scenario with an investor? And if you want to go tool around with a different scenario, you're not worried that the investor's data is going to be changing in front of their eyes or anything like that.
Yes, that you absolutely can do. So you can have 10 different scenarios if you choose to. One scenario called investor A, share with this person, and then the other ones, they can be the exact same and they won't mess each other up.
Awesome.
Okay.
Look at that. Fantastic job, Logan. Thank you so much. Good. We got Chris's question dialed in. Like I said at the beginning of this, and I said in this, is Gus and Forecaster are good friends. We've been doing stuff together for a while, and we're really aligned with where we want to see the startup universe go. To that end, Gust has a new product that is complementary with Forecaster, and they're actually part of our expert network in it. As early as next week, we are doing a financial model teardown, which is an aggressive sounding name for something that is actually much more holistic and nice. It's a financial model, excuse me, review, where you have a handful of startups submit their models in whatever shape they're in up front. And the Forecaster team actually goes and sort of breaks them down and tells them where they can improve, what's good about it, how they can improve their business. And we do this in front of other members of the cohort so that everybody benefits from it. Because in the early days, you generally want to share more than you want to hide, and you can learn a ton of stuff from other founders. So that's what we're calling mission control. Forecaster is going to be an important part of it. It also includes tons of other programming, and I'm sure you'll see members of the team in the program. We'll send that in the follow-on materials. I threw the link in chat. Jimmy, if you want to throw the link in the chat for the sign up for Forecaster so you can get people right at them, please do it. Check out both of us. If you get into one of our orbits, you're probably going to be in the other orbits too in short order. And Jimmy and Logan, thank you so much for spending time with us again today. Be on the lookout. We will continue to do events like this, publicly wide open events, in the coming months. And if we don't see you, have a fantastic holiday season and see you in the new year.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Bye.